So what I'd like us folks to do now is to just kind of locate where we are in our journey so far up to this point. So we started our journey looking at our emotional readiness to actually take on a motivational conversation where we're going to turn off our own need to kind of solve the problem for somebody else and instead focus on their perspective, their motivations, and acceptance of the fact that they can have the power and autonomy to decide for themselves what their choice will be on the specific behavior. So really locating in ourselves that emotional readiness. And when we do that, it kind of turns off our brain as far as like needing to prescribe something. And then it turns on our ability to listen with maximum curiosity, which was our second session, listening curiously with an open heart, open mind to help our audience to reveal their own motivations. So by opening up ourselves, we're creating an active, engaged audience in ourselves so that they want to actually share what their own motivations are, giving them the opportunity then to do that sharing with a very active listener. So that was our second session. Our third session was to look at utterances, which is when I do say something in this conversation, what might I want to say? And some of those options that we had there was to really, the basic one, the one that we want to use most often, being a reflective statement, where we're just demonstrating our empathy of their position accurately, and just letting them to be able to hear it back. We also created the metaphor of thinking of ourselves as a step, and that the step that we are will basically taking the material of what we're going to build the step out of from what we heard from the other person. And when we say an utterance back, we're giving them that step so they can build up to their own further ideas. So those were our utterances, the step being the complex reflection. And then we also had some of the other utterances, which we'll review some today, of emphasize autonomy, which is explicitly declaring, like the other person's, power to decide their course of action. Seeking collaboration, so coming alongside the other person. And also affirmation, which is validating strengths or activities or things that somebody else did that they might be able to be proud of, to help them to feel that pride in their own actions. So utterances. So these are the types of things that we say to encourage and continue to draw out more of the sharing from the other side. Then from there, we said, okay, so these first three sessions, we're looking about what I'm doing, what I'm saying. Let's draw back farther. Let's look at the entire conversation as a whole and look at what are we trying to do as we progress through the conversation. And we came up with these concepts of steps. Our first step being engagement, our second step being focusing, third step evoking, and ultimately a fourth step planning. And one of the key things that we talked about here is the concept of we may have a focused target. We may even bring a specific change target, objective, goal, whatever you would want to call it. The thing that we are actually doing the motivational interview for, we're bringing that. So the focusing is really kind of establishing that this is what we're talking about. And then when we go up to the third step, the evoking, at that point in time, we're drawing out and we're listening to where they're at on like the lay of the land all over this topic. So we've got this change target. Now we're exploring the lay of the land. And sometimes when we discover and explore the lay of the land, we find that the change target that we thought we were needing to pursue became something different, and we have to actually take a step back down and relook at the focusing before we can move forward to planning. So the example for that being, or a good example being, maybe you're talking to somebody about, like in a smoking context. Well, the goal was reducing smoking. But then after drawing out and listening, we actually heard a bunch of different stories, and we found that in many respects, oh, well, actually, one of the reasons that I smoke so much is because I have to escape from my boss at work. He's really hard on me. It's a very stressful environment, and I need to just get away. So it's not actually about smoking that I need to quit. It's about finding a way to deal with my stress at work without needing to have to smoke. Because if I just remove that smoking, then what am I using for my de-stress at work? So really, we have to solve the problem of de-stressing at work if we ever want that smoking to go away. And so that becomes now our new change target is, what do we do about that stress at work? And now we can actually start to brainstorm some ideas in that area. And that's what is most likely going to carry us through in the planning step. So now today, what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to pull together some of the glue that holds some of these different concepts together. And also just get some practice and some tidbits. So that was our review of these first 4 days. Do we have any sort of thoughts, questions, things people want to share before we actually, start to run through some examples? And if you ever want to type in the chat, you're always very welcome to, because I know some people would just prefer to type in the chat instead of verbally. Okay, let us continue. So I would like us to actually start off with the concept of summaries. So summaries are a special type of utterance that they use, that we'll be using. And they really help to glue a lot of things together. It's a special utterance that we would want to sprinkle in at different times and for different purposes. The best way that I like to actually think about a summary is when you feel like it's time to kind of move on to the next step, a summary can be really, really valuable. If you're detecting at some point that your audience is getting a little bit overwhelmed, that's a good time for a summary. If you yourself are detecting that you yourself are getting a little bit overwhelmed, that's also a good time for a summary. So for this, I would like to actually vol and ask pass somebody to participate in a little example with me. And we can have you be either the interviewer or the interviewee. And I think interviewer. And then I'm going to actually create a scenario where you might want to actually provide a summary. So would anybody like, I'm supposed to be volunteering asking someone. Tatiana, would you like to interview me? And if you would like to pass, then I can ask someone else.
I would rather watch someone else and then maybe I'll try. Yeah.
Okay, sure. And Timo, would you like to give it a go? And pass is always an option. Oh, you on mute? So if you were passing, I didn't know.
Yeah, I'm thinking of passing, sorry.
Sure, okay. Why don't I do a cluster? So Maria, Louisa, Rob, and Henrique, would any of you like to pass or go?
I can go if you like.
Yes, that's great.
Unless anybody else has got a burning desire.
Thank you very much, Louisa. I appreciate that. So round of applause for Louisa. Yay. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to choose a topic. And then what I want you to do is I just want you to just ask me some curious questions to explore where I'm at on the topic. Okay, so the topic is going to be using Drano on your sink.
I just caught the tail end of that, so I do want to know all about it. Why did you choose that? What led you to be thinking of Drano?
Well, my preference would have liked it, like snake the sink, but I don't have a snake. And I'm fine with getting, like dirty, so I would have like used the pipe wrench to open it up and just like, pose it like by hand, and but that wasn't an option. I couldn't really get a DS bend in the sink. And then, also like I'm really concerned about like the Drano because it's like a chemical, and like I don't know enough about like, what is its chemistry? Like, is it actually harmful to the environment or not? So I don't actually know, but it's a sort of like I still need to like clear up my sink. So then it's like, well, I don't know. Do I get like a plumber, or do I like not get a plumber? And then like I tried to plunger the thing, and then it just like instead of it going down, it just drew up like just like hell into my sink, and I didn't know it was in the drain, and it was just like disgusting, and I thought it was like a biohazard, and I was gonna like get COVID in my lungs. So it's just like it was like just crazy. Yeah.
That's quite a lot of anxiety for a blocked up sink. Yeah, sorry, I just know it's horrible, isn't it? I'm blocking a sink. It's like a necessary job.
It's pretty bad. Okay, so no, everybody just observe this. So I spoke in a specific way. It was all true. And so how might you know when a summary is a good idea? So when the list of things becomes like inordinately long, and somebody's just sort of like freewheeling like that, and it's just sort of like, okay, slow it down. If you find yourself saying like, okay, slow it down, okay, bring it down a notch. If you find your mind kind of responding like that, now's a good time for a summary. Okay, so then let's take a look at what a summary might have looked like in this situation. Well, before I give you an example, let's give all of you a chance to grab your sheet of paper and write down a summary of what might be like a good reflection, summarizing where I'm at, but briefer. You don't need to hit all of the points in the same level of detail that I got them, but just kind of like quick and dirty, like something that's going to help me to move on, to say, where am I at on this thing?
I was actually quite enjoying the performance, so you could have riffed on some more for my benefit.
It was pretty fun. So
I was enjoying your discomfort. Sorry, I shall get on with the exercise now. Mute going on.
Okay, so looks like, well, let's give you another 20 seconds. Okay, looks like everyone's pretty much done. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna do, we won't go to everybody, we're just gonna do a few vol and ask passes to see if people wanna actually give their summary a try and see what it evokes from me, because whatever we say is gonna evoke different things from our audience. Where we go is going to be an incredible amount of power in how this conversation is directed. What we say is going to evoke different things. So let's actually experiment and see some of what gets evoked by the different summaries you came up with. So, Rob, would you like to, give you a summary and then I'll just respond, and let's just actually continue the role play with you actually summarizing.
Okay, Vince. Yeah, okay, Vince. It sounds like you've been exploring a whole string of DIY possibilities. Could you get a snake? Can you get a decent wrench? You've tried using the plunger. Then there's Drano, and either you don't see a way to get them, or you're not comfortable with Drano. Do you think you've exhausted those possibilities now, and you're thinking about throwing money at getting a professional in? Just give me an update, please, on where you've got to with this.
Yeah, so I mean, we actually are like in plumber territory right now. I suppose I could, call around and like maybe I can't go to Canadian Tire to like get a like a wrench in the store, but maybe I could like order one in through Amazon. So I guess I could do that. So if I don't want to get a plumber, I guess I could do that. So I could like, and I know how to like do the plumbing. So if I have the right tool, I should be able to do it. But maybe I might be wanting to do plumber. I don't know, one or the other.
Okay.
All right, so let's actually take a pause. So let's actually break down what we just heard a little bit. Rob, can you give your summary one more time? And then let's actually take a moment to just kind of evaluate what is the different parts of this summary. Would you share it one more time?
I'm not sure I can, because it was more notes. But basically, it seemed to me you were exploring the DIY possibilities, whether you could use or whether you could get hold of a snake and a wrench, or a wrench. You tried the plunger, but were horrified by the results, and you were pretty uneasy about Drano. So you hadn't quite abandoned do it yourself, but you were beginning to think about getting a plumber. Is that where you are? Have I got it?
Yeah. So we've got a couple different parts to this statement here. So Rob, it started off with a summary of like some of the different things I've been thinking about. And a lot of times, a single word is enough of a summary to actually make it go. So you've thought about a lot of things. There's the plunger, the Drano, the wrench, the snake, and so just a single word can sometimes actually do it. And that's pretty close to what you did. So you summarize that part, and then in the next bit, you start to actually frame a bit of a recommendation in there. So like, so are you thinking that now it's plumber time? Like, so there's part of it is like a close-ended question. The first time it came through a little bit as recommendation, and then it came back out again from being a recommendation and turning into a question that was open-ended, because you ended it with like, so what do you think is kind of like the next thing for you type of a thing. So you ended it very open. So it went summary, then it went like a piece of advice, but then it went to open-ended question. So that piece of advice is generally something that we would generally want to avoid. But since you actually reopened the advice afterwards, it became like less sort of resistance inducing. So you remember when we did that utterance, like kind of flow chart that we all made in our first session? Can you picture that in your mind? I'm getting a few nods, but not very many. Let's actually let's recreate that right now so we can actually frame out what we're looking at here. So I want everybody to draw a line on their paper. And this is the most important line in all of motivational interviewing. Because this is what we are saying and how we can understand how we're going to get better at motivational interviewing over time. So on the left,
is this a vertical line or a horizontal line, Vince? I always get it wrong.
well, generally, I think of spectrums as a horizontal, and that's how I think about them. But if you think about it up down, then that's fine. But I'm going to speak about it left to right. So on the left-hand side of this horizontal line, I want you to write the words persuade and confront. And then to the right of that, but left of the center, I want you to write persuade with permission and give information. And I'm typing it in chat too, so that way if you want that, then it can be the written language for you to see there. Then to the right of the center, or to the right of the persuade with permission and give information, and also right of center, but still center-ish, is question and simple reflection. Then to the far right, we have emphasize autonomy, complex reflection, affirmation, and seek collaboration. So these are our codes that we use in order to code and sort of say, what type of language am I using? So whenever we're giving an utterance in motivational interviewing, we're going to look to see if it's one of these codes. And these codes are defined by the purpose of what's happening in that statement. When I say this, what happens in the audience? Something special happens from different parts of these codes. So when we give a summary, that's registering as complex reflection. That's very, very good. Summary is going to be a complex reflection, okay? Then we went into question, where it's sort of like, oh, well, so are you thinking about the, like the plumber? Now, sometimes a question can actually come through as advice. So it could be a question, but it could also be perceived as advice. If it is perceived as advice, it usually gets coded as a persuade. persuade actually evokes a little bit of resistance. Now, resistance can be in any type of form. The resistance could be in the form of, you know, a thought about, no, that's not what I want to do. Or it could be just in a, no, that's not what I meant. Or it could be like, you know, a distancing of the relationship, just even a small figment of discord in the relationship. So like any statement can actually be toned into a persuade dependent on the way that it's said. So when the advice is, oh, so are you in this position to like start thinking about a plumber now? So it sounds like a question, but it actually would be persuade. But then what Rob did next was he said, so, you know, where do you think you're at? Is this like plumber, or like, what are you thinking you are going to do next? So since he ended with, you know, where do you think you are? Where are you going to go next? Type of a thing. It was something like that. It ended with an open-ended question / seek collaboration, which is far right. So in this instance, we started over a complex reflection. We went all the way over to persuade, but then we softened the persuade and said, actually, no. So you could code that in any number of different ways. I'd have to listen to it very carefully to think about where it would be coded. But if nothing else, it's at least a persuade with permission. So drawing it back over from the persuade was actually very, very good. So definitely a round of applause for Rob.
Really interesting that you picked that up, because what I thought I was doing was echoing where you had got to, which was, oh God, we're going to have to get a plumber. So that's what I thought I was doing. And as a DIY person, I don't like surrendering to the professionals. But anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so then there you go. So like, and that's where like, you're a DIY guy. You were seeing aspects of yourself in me. And so like, there was a figment of like something in there of like not wanting to go to a professional within you. Part of that snuck its way into your utterance, but it also snuck its way back out again by the end, where you opened it up and you did return autonomy back to me, because at the end, it was my decision whether I was going to go actually to a plumber or not. So would somebody else like to offer their summary to see if something else comes out when you share it? I guess maybe I'll just do a general call to see if anybody else wants to give it a try.
I could try, but I'm not sure if I understood everything correctly.
Sure, yeah, let's just give it a try and just see. I am, you know, your actor to just pick it up where we left it off. And yeah, so I just told you about all my trials and tribulations.
So my summary is, Vince, you have explained with enthusiasm how you tried to clean your sink. You use different tools like Plunjo, Snake, etc. And finally, you decided to try a Drino, right?
Yeah.
So that was it.
Okay, so then this was actually such a wonderful example. I'm so happy you volunteered. Yay. Yes. Okay, so this is, see what got evoked differently that time. So we had a summary. The summary was very strong. It's very complex reflection. And then how did it end? It ended with right. You know, like, but it was a right, but it was like a phone, but it was a question. Okay. And what type of question was it? Was it closed or opened?
Is this a question?
It was a question. Absolutely, it was a question.
Yeah.
And sometimes our tone can make a question. So your tone gave me question. And it was close-ended question. When we say close-ended question, that means any question that can be answered with yes, no. Where the right answer is a yes, no. So in this instance, by asking a closed-ended question, you evoked from me yes. And that means now the talk time is back over to you again. I didn't have anything else to say. You were leading the conversation, and you led the conversation into a yes, no question. And then I gave you exactly what you asked for, which was a yes, no answer. So then now you'd have to actually continue on. So generally speaking, in motivational interviewing, we want to end with an open-ended question, which turns talk time back over to me to start, to keep building on my own ideas. So if you want to actually take a look at your notes and try and offer your summary again, but this time, maybe take a few seconds to figure out what might be an open-ended question look like.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, sure. Let's go. Let's try again.
Yeah. Maybe, do you think I forgot any detail? No, it's also right. Yes or no.
There you go. You're seeing it.
What will be your next step? Maybe something like that.
Well, right now, my husband.
But this is not a summary. So this is not a summary. A summary is somehow bringing things together. And I tried to open that summary, so to let the talk flow, but I forgot about this yes/no thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So keeping the summary was very good. And then that question that you just did was actually very evocative. And I was about to just start, I felt an urge, like you were evoking from me a desire to tell you what my next step is going to be. I was going to tell you about how my husband was over there bailing all the water out of the sink because we did the whole, I went overboard and I made a giant pot of boiling water because after it went down a little bit, we're just okay, we're going to just bone it out, and it's boiling water. And then the boiling water is in the sink. And it's okay, we're going to plunge the boiling water in it. It's bone it out. And it's just drawing up point crap. And it's okay, bail it out again. Okay, it's not going to work. So, so that was the next step. But then ultimately, we need to choose between the plumber or the pipe wrench. It's going to really have to be one of those two options. And maybe my husband will decide, or I will. I don't know, either one of us. So that's really, why did I feel so compelled to let an MI training be taken over by me talking for a minute about my dream? And the answer is because you evoked it from me. That open-ended question compelled me to speak about the topic. So that's what we're doing. We just want to compel people to talk about their own motivations for the behavior that we are actually trying to help emerge. So we're always evoking specifically this thing that we like to refer to as change talk. So the talk that the more I talk about change, the more likely I am to make a change.
Can I leap in with a question there?
Yes, please.
So in this case, there isn't I wouldn't have any agenda, with what you were doing, apart from maybe that you wouldn't burn yourself, or do yourself an injury, or gas yourself, maybe safety. But at this point, there's no agenda apart from listening to your, not in the same way as you would if you were, doing climate change stuff.
Well, let's actually just reflect back a little bit of what we just heard here. No agenda except for you don't want me to get poisoned because, we're friends and, we like each other. And also you don't want me to get scalded. You don't want me to get boned. And, you'd like me to just be able to have a nice life with a drain that's nicely flowing. So you actually do have quite a number of agendas that you could bring. You just aren't so invested in them that they are going to cause you a problem in having the conversation. You see, that's the thing. That's where we go back to the very core of what we're doing on session 1, which is, how do I actually manage my personal investment in the subject? We are all invested in all of you being as successful as you can be when you go and talk to elected representatives. So how are you going to be able to manage your personal investment? And that's where you have to go back to our lessons and the homework of session 1, which is channeling and saying, I'm going to summon that curiosity right now. Because if I'm not being curious, then I'm going to have a million and one things going on in my head about, like, there's the polar bears, and then there's, Dhaka being flooded, and there's the lives of all of our grandchildren and the future of humanity. And then also I'd like to be able to eat, and I'd like people in India to be able to drink, because, Himalayan watersheds aren't, drying up because Himalayan water glacial melt is gone. So the thing is you could carry 50,000 pieces of baggage with you into this meeting. But none of that's actually going to help you to actually be able to be curious and listen. So, and this is actually one thing that I brought up a long time ago with CCL US, which is, we have enough knowledge in this room to be able to give our entire country clinical depression, with, all the bad things that are going to happen with climate change. So the question is, does clinical depression help people change? No, it just makes you want to hide in a corner and do nothing and never leave the house. That's what clinical depression feels like. So when we have to
We should have a low carbon footprint then.
That's amazing. So there you go. So let's see. So summaries. There's maybe one more example that I wanted to use on summaries. Yes, I wanted to give us an example of a transitional statement. Now, transitional statements in our utterances meeting. Or did we talk? We might have talked about it in utterances or in our for process. Thumbs up if you remember the transitional statement, or thumbs down if you like transitional statement. What's that?
I think we didn't really.
Not so much, and no. Okay, so I'm getting, neutral to no, as sort of a general consensus. So I know we definitely didn't have time to practice it. I think so let's actually,
you did it at the end last week.
Yeah. So let's actually use an example of a transitional statement now. So a transitional statement is two summaries and an open-ended question. Okay, so the first summary is a summary of elements of resistance. Now, step 1 is optional. We only use step 1 if we think that the reasons for resistance, the reasons to not make the change, right? So we're talking about progressing towards change. So we only talk about the reasons to resist the change if those reasons are viscerally felt. So only you can be the decider of that. So when I was talking about like reasons for resistance or whatever, or when we're talking about with an elected representative of reasons that they might not, take the course of action of, putting a border carbon adjustment on a carbon fee and dividend. Were they speaking with firm passion, or were they like, well, they alluding to, oh, it's never gonna work? Okay, so that would be viscerally felt. You can hear it in the tone. There's body language that's emphasizing the words. Okay, so if there's a visceralness in it, then we can reflect that. And the reason to do that is we want to validate it. If it's not that viscerally felt, we just don't even need to remind them of the reason, because it's not that important to them. Well, it might not work. That's not viscerally felt. You don't have to, kind of remind them that it might not work, because they won't like, oh, it's never gonna work. It might not work. Those are our polar opposites. And then where in the gray area, you'll have to decide whether you think you should actually go or not go. Okay, so step 2. This is a summary of the change side. Well, I have an obligation. Well, I can see like there's an importance to, protect industry. I'm just concerned that like it's not enough to protect industry. Well, in this one, we're just going to focus in on the importance of protecting industry and how the border carbon adjustment will do that. So then that becomes, we want to reflect it back as a reason for change, and we'll make sure that our language matches the change language. So we summarize the points of change. And then the last thing is, so what's next? So what's next for you? So what's next for you on this? All of those are just generic, open-ended questions, and what they are going to do is they're going to draw out what's next for the person. They're very, very genuine, and when we ask this question, we're going to get an answer. Just the same as like when Timo asked a closed-ended question and I gave a yes/no answer. And then I loved when you actually said, you tried to do another question and then you realized, wait, that was closed-ended. And then you did another one that was open-ended right after. It was like, eureka. That was like a eureka, right? Because it's like, and it's all about shortening the speed to be able to get that realization. Okay, so that is our recipe. So shall we do a little bit of a trial run, giving people some chance to practice a transitional statement? Okay, so what I want everybody to do is I want you to picture a scenario. Oh, I know a few people have to go, but the recording will be there. And like I said, if you can't finish this and you want a bit more than the recording, you want the live, then there is that other session that's happening with CCLOs in Canada right now, and that's on the enviromentum.org calendar. So you're more than welcome to come, and I'd love to see you there. Okay, so for this exercise, let's see here. I want to make it useful for people who are going to be able to see the recording. So let me actually change it in my head. Okay. So what I'd like everybody to do is I want you to close your eyes and I want you to picture somebody that you know really, really well. Okay. One of the people in your life that you know the best of everyone. And I want you to picture something that this person is struggling on. And something that, like this struggle that you choose in their mind, you have, you know, intimate details of where they're at on all sides of this struggle that they might be kind of, you know, contending with. And you could, just in your mind alone, you could figure out what lies on either side or might lie on either side for them. So give me a little plus sign in the chat when you've got a good example for what you could actually use to run through this visualization scenario. You can give me a plus sign in the chat would be what I'm looking for. Okay, so let's actually try to keep going on with the visualization. If you don't still have the idea in head yet, maybe you'll be able to get a little bit closer with this next step. So what I want you to do is I want you to draw a vertical line on your piece of paper this time. And make sure you have like a good, you know, like 3-4 inches. And on one side, I want you to write reasons to not change. And specifically write that on the left-hand side of your line. So it'll be in the left column. Reasons to not change. And then maybe even put a, in parentheses, put sustained talk, which that's our jargon in motivational interviewing for anything that's like, just, you know, keep it on straight and narrow, staying the same, sustaining the behavior. Then on the right-hand side, we'll have change talk or reasons for change. And then next to that, I also want you to write the words desire, ability, reason, and need. And these are 4 keywords that we like to use to kind of help frame your mind about like what gets bucketed in this change talk bucket. So picturing this scenario in this other person, I want you to actually write 4 different things, you know, just like example concepts about what lands on either side for them. So let's start with the sustained talk side first. So I want you to put 4 items on the sustained talk side. And, you know, try to keep like each of them to just be short sentence stubs, or even just like 1 or 2 words in each of your 4 points. So 4 points of why this person is not going to make a change on this specific topic that you were thinking about. Okay, so now let's actually take a look at the other side. Now we want to engage our curiosity and look into this person and say, what are the reasons why they might make a change on this? And think about that desire, the ability, reason, need. Stop in at each one of those words and see what comes to mind. Ask yourself, what is this person's desire for change? Focusing in on the ability. What abilities does this person already have that empower them to change? Thinking about past experiences of when those abilities have been manifest. What abilities could help them to succeed? So that's focusing in on the abilities. Okay, so at this point in time, we should have some items on the left for our sustain talk side, and we should have some items to the right on our change talk side. So do we, are we all kind of in a position like that? Maybe give me like a, you know, maybe another plus sign if you've got, if you kind of are ready to move on. Okay. We'll go for a few, like another 30 seconds. Okay, so now when we offer this back in the form of a transitional statement, what are we transitioning from? In this instance, we're using the transitional statement when we feel like we've evoked a lot and they are ready to maybe move on to the next step. We want to test the water to see if they're ready to move into the planning stage of motivational interviewing. So that's really what this transitional statement is going to do, is it's going to say, I've evoked a lot, we've learned a lot about this situation, and now we're going to explore, should we switch the conversation, start talking about plans for the future? And that's what this statement's going to do. So we summarize step one, which is the left. And we only summarize it if those things on your list that you wrote down, if they're viscerally felt. If they're kind of half felt, we don't summarize them. And we only, in our summary, even if you've got 4 on your list, you only do the top 2. And only if they're viscerally felt. So we spend less time on the left-hand side. And we also, if we are going to talk about the resistance side at all, that always is first. It must be first. If we do it second, we just, you know, hit a tree, like wrong direction, very, very bad. It has to be first. There's very few things in motivational interviewing that are hard and fast rule. It's like probably the only thing I can think of in all of motivational interviewing. That's like hard and fast rule, which is if you're summarizing sustain and change talk, you do the summary of the sustain talk first. Okay, so like post, okay. Really emphasizing that. Okay, then change talk second. And this one, we can do more than 2. Probably not more than 4 because the whole point of a summary is to kind of summarize and kind of recollect. If we're trying to summarize more than 4 things, usually what happens is we end up losing them and the summary doesn't actually have its impact. So we pick our top 4 things that are most important on the change side. And then our third step is what? Do you remember?
What are you going to do next?
Yeah, there we go. So what's next? However it is that you want to say it. So what's next? What's next for you? So what are you going to do next? Now, just there was, why am I pausing here? We need to make sure that in our tone, we really make sure that it's as open-ended as possible, because we need to make sure that no is an answer. And we'll get into that in a second about like why no can actually be in many respects the best answer. And how we can actually do something incredible with a no, if we can actually hear it and, you know, accept the no that we get, if it is in fact a no. So what I want everybody to do now is I want you to look at what you've just created in front of you. And I want you to actually form a transitional statement as though you were actually in a conversation with this person. So I want you to write the first summary, second summary, and then the what's next for you. And we're gonna do it like a little round robin. We're gonna give 4 people a chance to actually share their transitional statement. Actually, let's make it 2 because we're gonna have other things we need to hit on too. So in each of your statements, you might actually be choosing to either skip step 1 or to do step 1. You'll have to be the deciding factor on whether you're doing it or not. So let's go for 1 more minute and then I'm gonna take an example. And we can depersonalize this. So that way, if somebody wants to share their example, I'll play the person who is your friend or colleague or family member. So in your summary, if you make this, there's no personal identifiers. If you feel comfortable actually sharing it, then I can just role play the person. We might be able to use this as an example. But of course, if you think that, you know, there's, you feel okay with that. Okay, so I'm gonna make a call out because I know that there's gonna probably be many people who would have to pass. So I'm just gonna put a call out. Is there anybody who has an example, and I can help, you know, sort of be a sort of the process of how we actually go about doing this. But that thinks that their example would be suitable for this group where there's no like personal identifiers and you feel comfortable sharing the example with me without any sort of personal identifiers. Does anyone feel they have an example that would work? Yeah, Christian, do you want to unmute?
Yes.
Okay, so so what I'm thinking is so we're good to do a little example round then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so can you tell me, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna role play that I have just been in this conversation, you've just done a motivational interview and you've just evoked all of those things on the list from me. Can you tell me on a scale of 1 to 10, how ambivalent was I on this change before we started the conversation?
5.
5? Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that I need? I don't think so. Okay. So if you want to actually, I'm just gonna be the person that and you just led me through this entire conversation. You just evoked all of those things that are on your paper from me, and now you're gonna actually give a transitional statement about this topic, and I'm gonna role play them. So you ready?
Yeah. Okay. Without any prep, you're going to know what it's all about.
I'm gonna know. I'm gonna be ready. Boy, I fall flat on my face, and that's on me.
Yeah.
I'll be fine.
I just decided that I need a bit more light. It's light is even on. Yeah. So so I just do the transitional statement then.
Yeah, and if you want,
Okay.
if you want to spend a minute to get yourself into motivational interviewing headspace, because I want you to just give the transitional statement. We're going to be having a motivational interview starting at minute 12. So, so yeah.
Okay.
Take as much time as you need.
So you kept your distance to this girl the whole evening, and I know not going in quarantine takes you away from going on your first holiday in 6 months, but you don't want to infect any other people, do you? And you know that you feel lousy if you do. So what are you going to do next?
Well, I mean, I've been thinking about that for a while, and I mean, I've been wanting to go on a vacation, but it's just not really the right time. And I'm just thinking, like, what if I were to just do like a local vacation type thing? Like, you know, how can I experience like the history of this community? Because I mean, it's, of course I like to go see the world, but I'm also interested in history, and there is a lot of things that I could learn about, you know, even where I am right now, you know, in a more natural way. So like maybe I just have to like find something here where I don't have to like put myself and other people at risk.
So you're planning to find a solution in your own environment.
I mean, I have to figure out how to actually go about like what am I gonna find, you know? And it's like, I mean, there is like the canal that goes through here, and there's a lot of history in the canal, and like maybe I could do like you know, there's the canal museum. I'm sure the canal museum is closed, but uh I could do internet-based research, and then maybe I could actually like find out like different important sites, and then maybe I could just like go visit those like, you know, semi-local sites instead of, you know, going to the Caribbean for the holiday or something like that. So maybe something like that. Okay, so let's take a pause.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, so what did we see here? Let's just kind of do like what happened when Christian shared his transitional statement. What was evoked from me? Isabel, what did you see me actually doing when I was going through that? What did you observe?
I feel like you try to open doors, find solutions, and so that probably his transitional statement was good because it was a good way to push you to find solution and alternative rather than to dwell on the issue.
Exactly. Yeah. So I didn't come up with that. Christian evoked that from me. I went into the planning step because that's what Christian evoked. Christian evoked planning. That's what a transitional statement does. When you say, so what's next for you? You know, it kind of just draws that out. There is a little bit of resistance that is felt when you say, so what are you going to do next? Because in the doing, there's a little bit of an assumption in that we're doing. It's a small one. So what's next for you makes less of an assumption. So what are you going to do next? If that comes out of your mouth, you don't need to like, you know, be like, ah, you know, it's not like, you know, have to like panic. It's not like terrible or anything like that. But there is a hint of an expectation that something will be done next. So the more that we can draw the expectation out of the statement, the more I can just sort of like feel my oats and just be like, okay, I got this. You know, because the expectation makes it feel like it's less my choice. We want it to feel as much as the audience's choice as possible, so that whatever they choose feels like they are the one choosing it. And that's going to be the thing that gets that stick-to-itiveness. We really want them to take this and run with it. So we want them to feel like it really is their decision. And ultimately, it's their behavior is their decision. So, so that brings us, I think, back to the point of what happens if it's a no? And so a no is a really, really powerful way to build engagement and to figure out what's actually next that isn't the actual action. So let me think here for a sec. I think an example is worth 1,000 words. So why don't we actually, Christian, can I ask you to do another run through again? And
the same one?
and let's do the exact same one. But you diagnosed that my starting ambivalence was a 5, but in actuality, my starting ambivalence on that 1 to 10 scale was more like a 1 or 2. Okay, so you thought it was a 5, but it's more like 1 or 2.
What does 1 or 2 mean? That you're fully against change, or that you're
It won't change any of your statement, because you genuinely interpreted all of those things to be at a 5. And your genuineness is very, very important. So as far as you're concerned, it's still a 5, but I'm going to actually respond where I'm at, which is a 2, which means that my answer is going to be no. So what I want you to do when I come up with a no is I want you to validate and demonstrate that it's my choice and I have the right to say no, so that we can see what happens when you do that. Okay, so whenever you're ready, let's give it a go.
Let's try and be more ready this time. Okay, Vin. So you kept your distance from this girl the whole evening, and I know going in quarantine will stop you from going on your first holiday in 6 months, but you don't want to infect any other people, and you will know you will feel lousy if you do so. What's next for you?
Oh, honestly, I'm just like, with the whole COVID thing, honestly, it's just so depressing and just so morbid that it's like, I'm not going to be able to like do this vacation, and I just hear it and I just like, it just makes me just want to like break down. I just can't even handle this anymore. I'm just like trapped in this like place, and I just want to have a break, and I can't have one. It's like, what am I even supposed to do with that? So I just like, I can't even just fathom it right now.
So you feel totally stuck on this issue?
Yeah, I think I just need to just take a step back and just sort of like just to reconcile like where I am with like this never-ending like monstrosity that just won't go away.
Well, it's
okay.
It's good to think it over, and you don't have to decide right away.
Okay, so like offered a validation of my like right to say no, and then what did I actually say after the validation to like that, like I don't need to move on this? What happened right after that?
Sure.
What did it evoke from me? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think it invoked pictures of plans that you didn't want to make.
Okay, so
you went into planning phase, but all the plans that came in front of you were unattractive.
Yeah, so let's break this down. So there was the first thing that Christian said, which is the transitional statement. I wasn't ready, and I was withdrawing, saying I can't do it. Now, there was no discord. I didn't feel pushed by Christian. I didn't feel like I had to do something. So I felt like I retained my autonomy, and I was feeling like I wasn't ready to make an action. I felt like you know, held down, compressed. But I got to at least just let that out. And then the next thing that Christian did was he validated that, like something, and I can't remember exactly what it was. I'm sure in the playback people could actually see that. But it was some form of validation that like that I wasn't ready to actually do something right now. And hearing that validation was like very, very empowering. And what it did is it was sort of like the second wave of, so what's next for you? So the first, so what's next for you is like, I'm not going to take an action. The second, so what's next for you is, I am going to take an action, but the action isn't going to be the action that we were thinking that it might be. The action before was the action of, are you going to like take an action on the change target, like taking a vacation or whatever? So I said no to that. So then the second one is sort of like, so what's next for you? Well, I'm not going to take a vacation, but I need to like self-reflect and say, what am I going to do? Because I'm dealing with all the stress. And I did actually say that I was going to do some of that. So actually an action emerged. A lot of times what we do when we have this transitional statement and we have a no, when we really validate that no, they're just saying no to the change target that we have been focusing on up to this point. When we do the next wave, validating the no, we oftentimes find that they do want to actually pursue the change target, but not as it is, more like a lower grade version of it, where it's like, I just need to figure some things out. So it's more of like a self-reflection period is a lot of times what happens, or I need to do some research, or I need to do some thinking about this. And that is the next sort of step. And a lot of times you will get some form of interest to actually explore just thinking about the topic, which can be an incredibly powerful thing because that's what they're ready to do. So forcing an action when they're not ready creates discord, but validating the no creates this incredible window to, I'm going to think about this. And that is very, very powerful. That might be the best outcome of the entire conversation, the best you could have done. And then if you
Can I ask a question about the follow-up on that? Mm-hmm. Because that is exactly what happened last week when I talked to an assistant from an MEP. So he ended up with a this is not the core activity of our MEP, but they had some very strong feelings about the outcome of the CBAM.
Yes.
And I did send him some information to follow up on that.
Yes.
And I plan to call him to follow up on that. But it's you can't start a conversation immediately with a transitional statement then, but you can't also pan it out to expect another 3/4 of an hour conversation. So it's how do you come back to that point in a follow-up?
And so this is a really great question. One of the most common questions that motivational interviewing people in our position are asking, which is, what do I do about time? And the answer that we always say, all trainers of MI, is that when you feel that time pressure, that's actually the reason for MI. Because MI is the fastest way that we know of in all of humankind to actually get the change. There is not a single linguistic process that can achieve a scientifically proven change outcome for an audience faster than motivational interviewing. In just a single 20-minute session, you can actually demonstrate like a change going up and then coming back down a little bit, but settling in at a new higher normal of the target behavior. And this code has been proven like in thousands of different laboratory studies. And just a single 20-minute interaction can do this. So that's the reason why I'm so passionate about motivational interviewing, because it's just the best we have. So, so if you're like, well, how can I do this? As we start to develop our relationship more, then our engagement process happens more quickly. When the less and less time we need on engagement, the more time that we can actually spend on focusing, evoking, and planning. The focusing will happen very, very quickly too, because they're going to know us. They're going to know what we're talking about. We've prepped them with information. We don't have to do as much time on focusing. And then we get to spend even more time on just the evoking and planning. And that's where we get to the good stuff. But of course, we could never ever get there without those two base things. So we always have to do our focusing and evoking, engagement and focusing. Okay, so wow, time just flies. We've spent so much time on summaries, but they just are such great things for gluing our interviews together. But we do have another topic that I want to get to, which is I wanted us to practice another structural tool that can be really useful in our unifying things and getting us unstuck, which is the brainstorming. So brainstorming is a wonderful structural tool. Well, maybe I need that before I talk about it. Does anybody have any more questions on transitional statements? I just want to actually just pause for a second and give everybody a chance to kind of just open and like type a question in chat or something if they want to, before we move on.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I found your framework very interesting, and I was wondering, you know, with the whole question about the what's next for you, right? Are there any alternatives to that question where we make it a bit more specific to suggest already some solutions within the question, or should we aim to keep it especially open to kind of enable that no, like you said, because I'm wondering if that might overwhelm the speaker, or if, you know, narrowing it down too fast won't leave it open enough. Do you see my question there?
Absolutely. And this is, if we've done our motivational interviewing up to this point, our second process is focusing. So there's an internal concern when we say, well, so what's next for you? I mean, are they just going to respond, well, time to order a pizza, get some dinner? You know, that's not the response that anybody is going to have, because if you actually have done the motivational interviewing up to this point, then there is a focused target. That's what you've been talking about. So when you actually say, so what's next for you? It's always going to be, so what's next for you on this topic? You know, you can't say, so what's next for you on this? You don't actually even need beyond this. It's understood. So what's next for you on carbon fee and dividend and border carbon adjustments? You don't need to say any of that, because that's already in their mind anyway if you've been talking about it. And by including other things with it, ultimately the transitional statement becomes significantly weaker at actually evoking what we want to evoke from them, which is what is their process for it moving to the next step. We don't know what the next step will be for them. Maybe it's they need to go talk to their colleague in the parliament and just kind of have some ideas, kind of brainstorming back and forth. Maybe their next step is to have a town hall meeting. Maybe their next step is to meet with you again. Maybe the next step is to talk to their environment and energy staffer. Like literally their next step could be one of 100 different things. We have no idea what their next step might be. We really want their next step to be the next step that feels most organically appropriate for the process they want to follow. So generally think we want, in a motivational interview, the thing we're most trying to cultivate is a step. Oh, well, welcome, Nigel. So, oh, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, so I think that that's my answer. Did that kind of make some sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that perfect. Great.
And so one last thing, other thing that I was going to say is, there is a challenge of what do we do with the ideas that we have in our head? And just the fact of the matter is that we are coming with an agenda. And the realization is that everybody always has an agenda when they're coming in. And the question is can we actually silence our mind to realize that the strongest, most evidence-based way that we actually get our agenda is to make sure that our agenda is not resting in our minds when we try to go get it. Because when when our agenda is sitting on the top of our head, it pulls us into persuasion. When we think about our reasons for why our agenda is so important, and those reasons, even if we don't say them, they might come out in our tone and make our statements more persuasive. And ultimately, the more persuasive our statements are going to become, the more of that sustained talk that we are going to evoke from our audience. So that's how we actually prove motivational interviewing works, which is all of the statements on that right-hand side, like the complex reflection, emphasize autonomy, those statements have been proven in the literature to evoke me, the audience, to actually do more of the change talk side. Now, the persuade and confront, those are scientifically proven to get me, the audience that you're doing a motivational interview with, those are proven to actually make me more likely to come up with resistance and sustained talk language. So whenever we use a persuade, we are scientifically and objectively making our audience less likely to take on the agenda that we were specifically trying to cultivate from them. So that's why we really need to figure out how to do that first, session of silencing our own mind so that we can just sort of lend it out to them with curiosity. So let's actually go on and explore this concept of brainstorm now. Unless does anybody else want to do a hand raise for a question? Just checking in, hand raise. Okay, I don't see any hand raises. So let's move on to brainstorm. Okay, so a brainstorm is a very standard, simple tool to get them talking when they're expecting us to come up with an idea. And usually the brainstorm will actually get them coming up with ideas. Now we're going to bring the focus target. The focus target is going to be the carbon fee and dividend, right? Like, of course, that's why we're going to talk to them. But there's all sorts of different conversations we can have with them about, how that might come to pass. Like from what we can do to support their constituency. Oh, would it be good if we helped, convene a town hall? Or, we could maybe collaborate on something like that. Or maybe it would be good to, maybe we could talk to some other elected representatives in your network to, form a bond and see if they wanted to be like co-partners on an amendment to a bill. Or, who knows what the case might be. But we don't want to come up with those ideas. We want them to come up with those ideas. And that's what our brainstorm is going to do. So if we're in the planning process and we feel they're stuck, that's when we might want to use this brainstorm. So, okay, so we will actually, in the planning process, with Christian and I on sort of like, on this like, am I going to take a vacation type of a thing? So Christian, I'm going to give you a little bit of a recipe for a brainstorm, and I'd like us to continue this example if you're okay with that. Is that good?
Sure.
Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to talk about like a brainstorm as a structured activity to kind of help somebody to kind of like figure out what might be something that might be valuable. So so let's do the first run where I was actually ambivalent, because that seems to be more like the case of where your target audience actually was. And so that was the situation where I started talking a little bit about like history, and there's the canal, and I might like want to do some history thing, something. So what I want you to do is I want you to, well, let's all write down these example statements, but then we're going to get Christian to demonstrate one of them. So statement one is, a bit of a complex reflection, and then introducing the concept of a brainstorm, and then a seek collaboration. So what this will look like will be, okay, so you were just talking about like, you know, the canals, and been thinking like maybe like there's something that you might be able to do like locally. There's sometimes like, I think it might be helpful just to actually like have a bit of like a brainstorm about like, you know, what might work, you know, like, should we just have like a brainstorm to kind of like discuss some different options that might actually be interesting? So it's in this case, what we're doing is we're just saying, what about like brainstorming? And so what, well, that's just sort of the example. You can see what happens when we run through the example. So we're kind of introducing the brainstorm as a bit of a structured activity, and then saying, what do you think about that? Can we do a bit of a brainstorm? And they're like, oh yeah. And the thing is what will happen is I will probably start brainstorming ideas, and you don't even have to come up with anything. That's what usually happens. So that's one recipe. And then why don't I give you the other recipe, which is the like the baby step recipe. And this is like another tool to kind of get yourself unstuck. So that would basically be complex reflection. And at the end of the complex reflection saying, so if you were to do like, you know, a plan, or you know, explore some of this, what do you think might be the first step in, you know, in doing something like that? So just some sort of open-ended question exploring the concept of a first step, and like seeing like what might be a first step. And you know, using the word might. I love to use words like might. Those are really like make it better. Turns over a lot of autonomy. So Christian, do you want to actually pick either of those tools and give it a go?
Sure. So you're looking at alternative options to find a local way to have your holiday. Shall we have a little brainstorm on what the options are?
Well, I mean, that seems like a good idea. I mean, well, I talked about the museum, and that's not really an option because it's closed. But like, I guess I wonder like there must be like curators of the museum, and I mean like they're still like there, they still exist, they haven't vanished off the face of the planet. So I mean like I wonder if I could like just, you know, like connect with one of the curators of the museum and just, see if they wanted to have like, you know, a Zoom conversation, you know, because that's what we do. But like maybe they might be able to like, you know, give me some insight to like, you know, some different like pages and landmarks and things like that that might actually be the basis for me to like, you know, figure out what might be next.
That sounds like a great idea to get the curators.
Yeah.
If you couldn't get them, are there any other options that we might think about?
I don't know. Like I kind of like, I mean, I kind of like that option. I don't know. I'm just thinking that like I wanted to go do that. Like, I mean, because like I could just surf the web page right now and just go find it. And, you know, I kind of just want to like, you know, just go search it right now. I think I'm going to. Well, is that okay with you?
let me get out of your way then. And
well, thank you for
good luck.
let
me know how it goes.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what you just evoked from me. I had no idea that I was gonna go there. It's just sort of like you said, well, let's brainstorm, and then an idea came to me. And it's funny because it's like it has a tendency when you do this brainstorm to just come up with like a baby step. A what's next step is usually the type of thing that emerges when we do the brainstorm, or when we do that, like, you know, what might be a first step. They usually evoke a very, very similar thing. And I also wanted to emphasize that your follow-up utterance was also good, which is like, what else? You know, or like, what other types of ideas do you have? That was also very, very good. In this instance, you know, I like it came through very genuine, and I was just finding myself like, if I didn't feel as good about the first idea, I might have actually taken that leash to kind of like say, let's actually explore some other ideas too, and maybe decide between. But ultimately, when you actually looked at, when you said that, I was like, I don't know, I really like that idea. It was like growing, and I was connecting that this was my journey forward. And I was like, actually, this is the one. So, you know, but it was both very strong. So what did everybody see there? Did you see that planning process playing out? So.
Well, I must say that I'm probably also a difficult customer on the word brainstorm, because I've been training students on brainstorms and always get an itch when you ask a student, how did you get the idea? And they said, well, we brainstormed and then they did something like this. So what shall we do? Well, I have an idea. Okay, that was the brainstorm, and let's do that. So, but that's...
I mean, you know, it's interesting. It's like, okay, brainstorm oval, you know, it's like fastest brainstorm level. But I mean, what's interesting is it's like, was it true to being a brainstorm? It's like, I don't know, what is brainstorm? Like, what we do know is it evoked the process of planning, and it cultivated a planning mindset. And it evoked planning type thoughts and utterances from your audience. So that's what we're doing. So regardless of whether or not it's brainstorming or not, is to a certain extent almost a moot point, because, you know, it's like, well,
it is.
There you go.
Yeah.
Wolfram.
So my first reaction when you made the suggestion was, the curators are on furlough and you shouldn't ask them to do work for free. So drop this idea, Vince, and come up with something else. So so obviously you can't say that, but let's say, how is there a way to guide a little bit in brainstorm so they don't get too invested in an idea that we think is not viable?
Oh boy, that's interesting. Maybe what you could do is, you know, so you've got, you know, one plan that's really worth pursuing, and this idea of like seeing like, if there's any like curators or any like people on the museum's like volunteer team that you might be able to interact with. So that sounds like you've got something really good there to pursue. Excuse me. And then like I wonder, would it be useful to make like a backup plan in case that doesn't work out? Like what might be some other ideas just in case that doesn't come through for you. So I mean, if you are sure from your outside perspective that it's very likely to fail, like nobody wants to have their plan be Debbie Downered by somebody. So, at this point in time, like it's literally kind of hilarious because the next activity would be fail forward. Like if I have to fail, I have to fail. But at least what we can do is we can maybe kind of do a little bit of brainstorming about like what might be a plan if that doesn't work out. So maybe that might work. What do you think about something like that for you, Wolfram? Do you feel like you could execute that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so the concept of fail forward is how I wanted to end. Now I realize that we don't actually have much time left. This concept of fail forward kind of merges with what we're actually going to be talking about next week, which is really building in the concept of deliberate practice. And so I want to actually challenge everybody right now to look within your network or even within the network of people that are in this workshop training series experience to locate another person that you can have motivational interviewing experiences with. So I've actually sat for no less than like 12 role plays. I think it was closer to 15, where I actually was unpacking all sorts of different change targets in my life. And I've run out of change targets, so you've all fixed me, so I'm now a perfect human. No. So it's like, okay, you just motivational interviewed all the problems out of me. So I don't have anything else left to actually do a motivational interview on. So I can't actually be your target anymore. So you're gonna have to look and be a target for each other. But what I can say is like, I had like this large laundry list of different things to talk about, everything from physical activity, emails, dealing with social media and that train wreck. I mean, you name it, it was there, and we've talked about it. So if you want to actually create like dyads or duos or whatever you want to call it, where you like motivational interview each other and you trial the experience, then if you want to actually send that video to me, you can use the record feature in Zoom and download it to your computer. If you send me that video, I can put it into an autocoder and give you the transcription file. And what that is going to end up doing is it's going to be the basis for you to actually look at and learn by watching yourself. There's a wonderful set of things that you can see when you do this. Actually, I think that using our last 5 minutes to just set this up is probably the best use of our time. So why would we be doing this? When you actually do a motivational, a full, like no longer than 20 minutes, if you can keep it to 20 minutes, that's a perfect window of time. So doing a 20-minute motivational interview, try and get it to be about that length. Then as you do that, I can guarantee that you are going to have what we call a motivational interviewing non-adherent statement, which is one of those persuades or confronts. It's most likely to be a persuade. And it's very, very difficult like to remove all persuades from our motivational interviewing. We've probably, in the training so far, we've probably removed 50% or more of what your like desire to persuade. But this persuade will still come up. And when you actually see yourself doing the persuade, you'll be able to see it, and something special will happen, kind of like what we saw before, which is I pointed out that the one fellow, I can't remember his name, he did a closed-ended question. He didn't even realize that it was a closed-ended question. And if you watch it back, you'd be able to see, you could look at his body language, he didn't even realize, he didn't understand it was a closed-ended question. Then he did another question and he started to say it, and he was like, I was about to do a closed-ended question. So the amount of, he went from not seeing it all to being able to like do a closed-ended question, but see it even in the period of time that he was doing it. And then to just not do a closed-ended question at all. So in just 3 iterations, he was able to see that. So when you see yourself do a persuade, you'll be like, holy crap, that was a persuade. What would I have done differently? And that will, seeing yourself will give you the opportunity to actually do that. I can objectively say that I went from like, you know, the high school JV swim team to like the Olympic swimming pool when I watched myself doing motivational interviewing. That will be the biggest improvement that you will have in your skill set.